And welcome, sports fans, to today's Roundtable. Glad you joined us for this Saturday morning for another Roundtable edition. And we are in the exciting point of the year, especially in high school football, as we wrapped up the district championships throughout the area last night on Friday night. And we'll show you the games that took place last night, the results, as teams move on to the state tournaments in the respective classes. Also going to show you a replay of, or the highlights of, the St. Genevieve-Kennett broadcast that we brought to you live last night from Kennett. And an exciting finish there for the Kennett Indians. We'll show you some of the highlights from that from last night. Also, again, showing you the quarterfinal matchups going into next week in high school football for the state of Missouri, now going to the state tournament starting next week. So very exciting time there in high school football. Also show you the games that we plan on doing going forward right here on YHC. And also look at the basketball class and district assignments. They were released this week. We're going to show you the class and district assignments for high school basketball. That's always exciting each year to see which teams are going to come out in each district. Sometimes we see teams move a district over and kind of makes up for some great district tournament matchups come the end of the year. And sometimes we see teams drift from one class to another as well. So we're going to show you those district and class alignments for Missouri high school basketball. And it'll be basketball season before you know it. I think some schools are going to get started next Friday night. And typically it's right around Thanksgiving and right after Thanksgiving. So it's going to be here before you know it in high school basketball. So we'll take a look at those class and district assignments as well here this morning. So let's go ahead and move on into some results from last night in high school football. Taking a look at the Class 1 District 1 championship game. Big anticipated matchup there. A rematch of last year's district championship. And Valley Catholic come out on top in this one. Big victory for the Valley Catholic Warriors, 43-6. Really no contest there last night. Haytie's run as a potential repeat champion at the state level comes to an end last night, but another fine season by the Hayti Indians. Had a 2-loss season this year. They lost the first week to Thayer, who's a powerhouse in Class 1, and Valley Catholic moves on with that district championship. Valley Catholic, over the last couple of years, took a hiatus from winning that state championship upwards, I think, 5 to 6 times in a row. And a couple teams getting their bite, getting their chance at that state title, which Hayti had one of the most memorable games most memorable runs we've ever seen last year. But Valley Catholic winning that Class 1, District 1 title up in St. Genevieve last night. And in the Class 2 District 1 championship, the Scott City Rams over the Crothersville Tigers decisively, 35-14 in that rematch from a couple weeks back. And Scott City moving on, an undefeated season still with the Scott City Rams. They move on to the state tournament next week. We'll take a look at their potential matchups going forward in just a moment. But a fine season by Scott City. Crothersville just coming up a bit short, but another fine season by the Crothersville Tigers. And Scott City just had the better team this year, and they move on to that Class 2 state tournament. And in Class 3 District 1, a game that we brought live to you last night, the Kennett Indians shut out the St. Genevieve Dragons 40-0. No problem for the Kennett Indians last night, and that's been the story each week throughout the season. Kennett extends their undefeated season and got a decisive victory in a rematch against St. Genevieve back in Week 2. Had a 33-0 victory over St. Gen, 40-0 last night. So another great performance by the Kennett Indians in that matchup last night. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the highlights from last night. Take a look at that. And we see here, to start the game, first drive for St. Genevieve, they go to punt, and it's blocked. Marcavon Harrell picks it up, goes along the right side at the 20-yard line. The very next play, the first offensive play from scrimmage for the Indians, Marcavon Harrell takes the handoff and goes right up the middle into the end zone. Quick strike score for the Kennett Indians, going up 6-0 early on in that first quarter. Into the second now, Marcavon Harrell taking the handoff from Bodie Ellis up the right side inside the 5-yard line, and sets up a goal-to-goal situation for the Indians, and an easy touchdown run there for Jordan Jarrett to cap it off. And here later in the second quarter, we see a nice run. Marcavon Harrell getting that score for the Indians. And we see here Bodie Ellis, play action pass going into the passing game, touchdown pass there for the Indians. Nice play drawn up and execution there for Kennett. And we see here later on Marcavon Harrell on a 3rd and long play, taking the handoff or the pitch and going all the way in for the score. Another long run for the Indians as Marcavon Harrell had a big night for the Indians, and that pretty much put it away there for the Indians. But see a nice little inside handoff, and that goes all the way in for the score. And the Indians running away with it at this point. 40-0 final score. The Indians come away with that second straight Class 3 District 1 championship game, as you see there in the plaque presentation. And the Kennett Indians victorious once again last night for another district championship. And Kennett's one of the most impressive teams this year, certainly. They've got an undefeated streak going on and haven't really been tested. They haven't been tested in the regular season. They're certainly going to be tested at some point moving forward. We'll talk more about their potential state quarterfinal matchup coming up next week, and we'll talk more about in the next segment. But I'll tell you, the Kennett Indians having a storybook season. I think with last night's win, I think they're right at the record, actually surpassed the school record for wins in a season. So it's certainly been an historic season for the Kennett Indians this year. And moving on to the Class 4 District 1 championship game, the Farmington Knights hosted the Cape Central Tigers and got a victory up in Farmington last night, 45-35, as Cape Central's season comes to an end. It's been an impressive season for the Tigers. It was right around a 500 season for Cape, but getting that second seed in the district, playing for a district championship, and competing with the Knights on the road in Farmington. Not a bad way to finish the season. So Kent Gibbs' first season in Cape Central, gotta see how it finished. The way it started, it was a little rough start, and finishing up pretty strong with a second place finish in the Class 4 District 1. So Farmington will move on to the Class 4 state tournament in the quarterfinal round. And Jackson extends its undefeated season with a Class 5 district victory over Fox High School last night at the Pit in Jackson. 49-20 score for the Jackson Indians as they move on with another district championship and moving on to that Class 5 state tournament as well. And those are your matchups from last night in the district championships. And speaking of the game that we broadcast last night, you can watch that replay here on YHC over the weekend, coming up Saturday at noon, Sunday at 3. We'll probably have another few times in there as well, but that's typically, you can watch all of our replays Saturday at noon and Sunday at 3. That's St. Genevieve and Kennett replay right here on YHC. You can watch it on demand anytime. Go to our website, yhctv.com. It's available there. Go to our Facebook page. It's available there as a Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube channel. Watch it on demand anytime on our online platforms. And we're going to take our first break, and we're going to come back, talk about those storylines from last night, and just add a little bit more context to the wins for the respective teams last night and their games moving ahead for those district champions. So we'll take a look at those coming up.
If you or your loved one has disabilities that cause you to need a little help, Boot Hill Area Independent Living Services can provide the assistance you need. At Bales, we want you to have control of your life and assist you in thriving in an independent lifestyle. The Consumer Directed Services Program allows you, the consumer, to choose who assists you in conducting your daily activities. Bales serves Stoddard, Dunklin, New Madrid, and Pemiscot counties. Call or visit our office in Kennett to see how we can help you maintain your independence.
And welcome back, and now let's take a look at some of the storylines from last night from those games in the area, and take a look at that Class 3 District 1 championship game. Kennett winning its second straight district championship as they roll over the St. Genevieve Dragons last night, 40-0. And as we mentioned, Kennett having an historic season, undefeated and really untested. It's one thing to go undefeated, but to even go untested, I don't think they don't have a victory that's less than double digits in the scoring margin for each game of the year. So a dominant run by the Kennett Indians. I tell you, this is a team that they don't turn the ball over. They're disciplined, well prepared, and that goes a lot to Joel Wyatt and his staff preparing each week. And Joel Wyatt, you probably won't meet any other coach that prepares more, prepares better than Joel Wyatt in certainly this part of the state, or even across much of the state in high school football. And I tell you, this Kennett team comes in very well disciplined, well prepared. They're not a highly penalized team. The only penalty you'll probably, if you do see one, will be maybe a slight holding penalty on a big play, and they pull it back and give them a 10-yard penalty, and they'll come up with another big play to break out a big score. So very well coached team, very well disciplined, well prepared. And I tell you, it's one thing to come in prepared, but it's another additional thing to actually execute. And that's certainly what the Kennett Indians do each week. You can tell they come in prepared, they got a game plan, they execute the game plan, and it's just been a machine throughout this whole year for the Kennett Indians. And this is an historic season. This is probably the most historic season we'll see from the Kennett Indians. Certainly the last year was probably right on par with this year, but I think this year, with the way the state tournament kind of matches up, I think they got a better opportunity this year to do better in the state tournament, just due to Cardinal Ritter last year just having an otherworldly team last year that went to the state championship. But Kennett even better than last year. Their skill positions come back for the most part, and certainly the younger groups coming up. I tell you what, we talk about Marcavon Harrell, Jordan Jarrett, Bodie Ellis, these guys making play week in and week out. But I tell you, the offensive lines, the defensive lines, it's hard to just point those guys out, because touchdowns is what makes up a lot of the attention. But I tell you, this offensive and defensive line have come up big this year. Talking about a well-disciplined group, you don't see hardly any false starts. You don't see any offsides hardly for the Kennett Indians. Very well-disciplined group. They're up front for the Kennett Indians. So I tell you, that's kind of the unsung heroes this year. They just do their job. They come in, they execute, and that's what busts out those big plays for Jordan Jarrett, Marcavon Harrell, and the pass protection for Bodie Ellis, getting those big plays down the field. So the offensive, defensive lines have certainly been just as impressive and productive as you see. Jordan Jarrett, Marcavon Harrell, those guys making the big plays, but they make those plays possible. And certainly on the defense, you see Kennett defenders. I know Jordan Jarrett's had a great year defensively. Comes in and he really disrupts the backfield when they play that aggressive defense, getting into the backfield. Justin Hunt, also a big defender. We saw make some big plays last night. Tanner Duncan, young linebacker for the Kennett Indians, making a lot of plays. It's just hard to spread all that around to talk about each individual player, but it's more collective than it is individual for the Kennett Indians. And it's been a pleasure following them, and we intend to follow them as far as they go in the state tournament going forward. So hopefully you'll tune in the rest of the way as we bring their games here on YHC. We'll talk more about their potential game coming up here momentarily. And Valley Catholic reclaiming that Class 1 District 1. They had a stranglehold on that for the longest time, even not only the district but the state Class 1 classification in high school football, and had a good run of about 5 straight state championships, including the district championships up until a couple years ago. And just had a drought there of state championships for a couple years, but still competitive team. But certainly got back on that championship route this year as they rolled through their schedule and defeated Hayti decisively. What was that, 43-6, I believe it was, 42-6. But impressive run by Valley Catholic this year. I tell you, last year, one of the best teams we've ever seen, if not the best small school team we've seen, especially at the Class 1 level, in the Hayti Indians last year. And they rolled through their schedule. I think their average margin of victory was 40 points, 40 some odd points a game. They did play Valley Catholic last year in that district championship and only won 21-7. That was their closest game all year long. Well in hand, but certainly the closest game that Hayti got on their schedule last year in that district title game. So it made you think, coming back with Valley, with the team they had coming back, and Hayti losing so much of what they had last year, a big senior class, it certainly made Valley a much better candidate to win that district championship this year, with everything they had coming back and what Hayti was losing. But another impressive run by Hayti. I tell you, coming off a state championship, there's expectations to try to, fill the shoes of last year's team, regardless of what you lost, what you might have coming back. But a great job done there at Hayti this year. Saw some new faces come on the scene. Trayvon Thomas, sophomore quarterback, had a big year. Golly, gonna miss some of these names, but I think it's Trey Stevenson in the backfield. He really come up big in the backfield this year for the Indians. So look out for the Indians. They're still going to come back, be competitive. That's the program they've got there in Hayti. But this year is Valley's year as they bounce back with a great season and claim that Class 1 District 1 championship. Moving on to a big potential Class 1 quarterfinal. We'll talk about that here in a second. And Scott City winning their first district title in some time, going back to 2008. 11 years since their last district championship in football, and what a year they've had. Scott City continues their undefeated year over Caruthersville, and they matched up just a handful of weeks back in the regular season. It come down to the wire in that game, but Scott City handled it 35-14 in the district championship at home at Scott City. And I tell you, it's one thing we haven't seen, other than Malden or Caruthersville, pretty much dominate that Class 2 District 1. And Caruthersville was back on top for the last couple of years in that district. Now Scott City moving up and claiming that district title this year for its first time since 2008. So an impressive run by Scott City this year. I tell you, as one team throughout the year, they were getting wins consistently, but you're just like, well, how good are the Scott City Rams? How good? It's one. We see teams start out 5-6-0, and come district time they kind of wither out, but not this team. Scott City's had a great year. Coach May's done a great job there at Scott City. Got some big-time playmakers, Jimmy May, Spencer Stratman, just to name a few. But they've got a great collective unit up there in Scott City and going to continue their run into the Class 2 state tournament starting next week. So congratulations to Scott City on extending their impressive season into the state tournament. Jackson, no surprise, winning that Class 5 District 1 championship, extending their undefeated season with their second straight district championship, defeating Fox last night at the Pit in Jackson. A little strange that we don't have a Jackson Poplar Bluff district final. We've seen that year in and year out the last number of years, but Fox was able to knock off Poplar Bluff last week in the district semifinals, so matching up Fox and Jackson last night, and Jackson will move on for that district championship into the state quarterfinal round. Got a very tough opponent in their next round. We'll take a look at that, but congratulations to the Jackson Indians claiming another district title last night. And we're going to come back to this in a moment, but yeah, Missouri class and district assignments have been released. Very exciting to see those district and state tournament, or district and class assignments for this coming season. We're going to touch on that in a moment, but just to remind everybody, they have been released this week, and we're going to touch on that in just a moment. Didn't quite want to get to that yet, but don't go away. We'll be back with that. Also, we're going to take a quick break and be back with the quarterfinal matchups taking place next week in high school football here in the state of Missouri. We'll be back with that up next.
Hey folks, it's hot out here, but the deals are even hotter. Like this late model Equinox starting under $300 per month, or a Ford Focus starting $149 per month, or several pre-owned Ford Escapes under $200 per month. Baldwin Ford, Lincoln Toyota, home of the lifetime warranty.
And welcome back. Now we're going to take a look at the state tournament matchups going forward. We'll start with Class 1 and Missouri High School football. Only 8 teams remaining in the state tournaments now. We're in the quarterfinal matchups here as Valley Catholic will take on Thayer, and Valley Catholic will host Thayer. It's just a matter of being on top of the bracket on a certain number of years when both teams have the same number of playoff games hosted. So Valley Catholic and Thayer, both number 1 seeds. Valley Catholic will host Thayer next week, presumably Friday. Some of these games can be moved to Saturday. It's just a matter of what the teams decide on, but it will be either Friday night or Saturday afternoon. We'll see. But Valley Catholic hosting Thayer next weekend, and that's a mammoth matchup. They're two of the top teams in the state in Class 1, and just going to the Class 1 or the final Class 1 state rankings here. Let's take a look. Lincoln on top at number 1. You got Thayer at number 3 and Valley Catholic down at number 6. So you got number 3 matchup, or number 3rd state ranked, traveling to take on 6th state ranked Valley Catholic. So big matchup there, as you see. 2 top state ranked teams in Valley Catholic and Thayer. And you never know, the winner of either one of these teams could move on and potentially win a state championship from this contest. So a big matchup in high school football. Quarterfinal round of the state Class 1 state tournament next weekend as Valley Catholic hosts Thayer. And you see the other matchups there in the quarterfinals. Mid-Buchanan versus South Harrison. Lincoln, the top-ranked team, versus Windsor. Marceline versus South Callaway. That's your Class 1 state tournament bracket going forward. And moving to Class 2, Scott City will host Lutheran North in the Class 2 quarterfinal. And it's going to be a tough matchup there. Lutheran North, well known for their football teams up there in St. Louis. And we've seen Crothersville and Lutheran North battle it out over the last couple of years. Lutheran North certainly getting the better of that matchup decisively over the last couple of years. So Scott City will have their hands full hosting Lutheran North next week. But certainly a nice test for Scott City. And we'll see what happens there in that Class 2 quarterfinal. Big matchup there for the Rams taking on the perennial Class 2 power, Lutheran North. And the other matchups there across the state, Summit Christian versus Lathrop, Ava versus Lamar, and Hallsville versus Clark County. And take a look at Class 3, the Class 3 state tournament for the state of Missouri. Kennett will host the winner of Roosevelt and St. Francis Borgia. They've got an afternoon game here on Saturday. They didn't have a Friday night game, so that game is still yet to be determined. That district champion between Roosevelt and St. Francis Borgia up there in the St. Louis area. So that Class 3 District 2 championship game taking place this Saturday afternoon. So we'll see where Kennett will, who Kennett will face after this afternoon between Roosevelt and St. Francis Borgia. We talked about last night in the contest during the broadcast that Kennett would host that game, but I was a little too quick on the gun there. It does kind of, I was a little fuzzy on the rate, kind of the protocol for hosting the state tournament games. How it works is certainly now that we have 18 districts, basically the higher seed host for sure is Kennett hosted 3 district tournament games in a row as the number 1 seed, and typically how it works is basically on whether it's odd, I guess it's on the odd number years. We're in 2019. The top team on the bracket will host the state tournament game. So, we presume that since Kennett was on the top of the, at the top of the state or on the top of the bracket, whoever they were hosting next, St. Francis Borgia, Roosevelt, they were on the top of the bracket, so they would host. Forgetting that actually it matters of how many home games you've hosted along the way, and if you've hosted more games than the other team. So if you got 2 teams you're comparing, and at the state tournament level, who's ever hosted the most? If there's a team that's hosted more tongue tied here. If there's one team that's hosted more postseason games than the other, then that team with the least home games in postseason will host the game. So it potentially could be at St. Francis Borgia or Kennett. So it comes down to whoever wins the Roosevelt and St. Francis Borgia game. Roosevelt's the number 1 seed in that Class 3 District 2 tournament. St. Francis Borgia is the number 3 seed. So St. Francis Borgia had a road district semifinal game playing against the 2nd seed. They defeated St. Clair. So they went to St. Clair for that district semifinal, won, and now they're on the road to take on Roosevelt, the number 1 seed in that district tournament. So if St. Francis Borgia were to win this afternoon, Kennett would have to go to St. Francis Borgia in Washington. I think it's in northwest of St. Louis, outside of St. Louis. So they would have to go to Borgia since Borgia will have less home games in the postseason. So if Roosevelt wins, it will be Kennett versus Roosevelt. So they were both number 1 seeds. They hosted the same number of district tournament games. So it would go to that who's on the top of the bracket of the 2 teams. So there, Kennett would be on the top of the bracket versus Roosevelt. So Kennett will host. So it's two potential matchups. Kennett will host Roosevelt, or Kennett will go to St. Francis Borgia. That's how it works with the potential hosting of that district round or the quarterfinal round. It just got, I knew that was the protocol, but I was reverting back to, because the district tournaments have changed quite a bit over the last decade. I was reverting back to potentially how it used to work. You played 3 district games at the end of the regular season. Then you went into the sectional round, and then that's when you said, okay, who's on top, who's on bottom, depending on the year. If it's an odd number year, the top team hosts. Even number year, the bottom team hosts. And then from there, you basically, once you got into the quarterfinal round, you compared how many, if the last team had a home game, and if both teams from the sectional round had home games, then it went to that top bottom. Who was on top, who was on bottom, who would host. And then if one team hosted a sectional game and the other team didn't, then the team that didn't host the sectional round would host the quarterfinal. So basically they try to even up the home matchup, so a team's not on the road every round throughout the state tournament. Just try to even up the home games for each team throughout the state tournaments, because these state tournament games, you can really start to travel halfway across the state in these potential matchups. So that's what we have to look for. And what really confused me is that we never considered the district games as number of postseason games. The district games are always in the regular season. Now they've turned the district tournament into a postseason, so the games hosted during the district tournaments matter now, whereas used to they didn't. It was only a matter of the sectional round on. Now they're including the district games, the district tournament games, as criteria for if you host a potential quarterfinal and semifinal game. So I know it's complicated. I probably made it even more complicated, but I just want to straighten that out, because we talked on the broadcast last night, Tommy Jacobs and myself, that Kennett will host the next round, but it's not necessarily the case now that I thought about it overnight. But 2 scenarios: Kennett will host Roosevelt or go play at St. Francis Borgia in Washington, Missouri. So we'll have to keep our eye on that game this afternoon to determine where Kennett will play this next weekend. It could be a Friday night game or a Saturday game. The 2 teams can come together and see who plays when, and certainly the location will be determined, but the time, Friday night at 7 or potentially Saturday at about a 1 or 1:30 start. They've got discretion between the 2 teams when they want to have that game, Friday night or Saturday afternoon. So we'll see between Roosevelt and St. Francis Borgia this afternoon. Other games in the state tournament: Odessa and Savannah, that's around the Kansas City area. Then we got the defending Class 3 state champion Trinity Catholic taking on Lutheran St. Charles there in St. Louis, and also Blair Oaks and Cassville around central Missouri. So that's your Class 3 state tournament for Missouri going forward. And the Class 4 state tournament, Farmington will take on McClure or St. Mary's. That district championship taking place this afternoon as well. McClure and St. Mary's, so Farmington will take on either one of those teams. Grain Valley versus Platte County, and the other quarterfinal matchup, Ladue versus Liberty of Wentzville, and Camden versus Webb City out in the Ozark area. Camden and Webb City. Now in the Class 5 district champion, or the Class 5 state quarterfinal, Jackson will host Eureka, and that will be a Friday night game. It was originally scheduled for Saturday afternoon, but it has been moved to Friday night at 7 for that Class 5 state quarterfinal. Don't have the other matchups there from last night going into, I think a lot of those games are taking place this afternoon in the other district tournaments in Class 5. But Jackson will host Eureka up at the Pit in Jackson. Big-time matchup there. Jackson, the number 2 ranked team in the state. Eureka a little on down there, I believe, in Class 5. We'll take a look here. Class 5, Jackson on top at number 2 in the final regular season poll. Eureka right behind them at number 3. So you got the second ranked and third ranked teams in the state going at it in that state quarterfinal. So a big time matchup there at the Pit in Jackson. I'm sure that place is going to be rocking, packed out. Is probably the best venue you can watch a high school football game from, is there at the Pit in Jackson. Big time matchup, Jackson taking on Eureka in that Class 5 quarterfinal. So we'll see what happens there Friday night at 7 p.m. up at the Pit in Jackson. So there's your quarterfinal matchups. Very exciting time. We got a couple teams still in the mix, certainly with Scott City, Kennett, and Jackson from our southeast Missouri area, and hopefully they fare well in their quarterfinal games next week, and we'll keep you updated right here on YHC. And we're going to take one more break here. We're going to come back with a game that we're going to broadcast, have more information on that, as well as the basketball district and class alignments for this coming season, and also just touch on a little bit of college football and NFL football for this weekend. We'll be back with that coming up.
At Glen Sain, we're always thinking about our customers. We advertise best price, best service. That's what we have. At our dealerships, our people don't talk about other dealers. We talk about Glen Sain. If you have credit issues, we have the finance managers do a really good job of finding low interest rates. That's what we do. We want people to leave and say, I like Glen Sain. Glen Sain, and God bless our troops. Kennett, Rector, and Paragould.
And welcome back, and now let's take a look at the upcoming broadcast that we'll have this coming potentially Friday or Saturday. We've got this down as Saturday, but you never know. It could be a Friday matchup depending on what the two teams plan to do. But in the Class 3 quarterfinals, we will broadcast the Roosevelt or Borgia versus Kennett Class 3 quarterfinal. We'll bring it to you right here on Channel 21, New Wave Cable, as well as YHCTV.com and Facebook Live. So look forward to that one. Potentially a Saturday afternoon or a Friday night. We'll see what the two teams determine, but it will be Roosevelt or St. Francis Borgia versus Kennett, and we don't know the location yet. It depends on who wins that game. As we mentioned, it's going to be Kennett hosting Roosevelt next week, or Kennett on the road to Washington, Missouri, outside of St. Louis at St. Francis Borgia. So we intend to broadcast either one of those games, whether it's at Kennett or at Washington at St. Francis Borgia. So we have every intention to broadcast that game regardless of where it's at, and we will follow the Kennett Indians the rest of the way here on YHC. So if you're a Kennett Indian fan, we're going to have it for you right here on YHC as their run for a state championship continues into the state quarterfinal round. So look forward to that one. That'll be Friday night or Saturday afternoon. Roosevelt or Borgia versus Kennett. That Class 3 quarterfinal, we'll bring it to you right here on YHC. So look forward to that next week. And now we're going to take a look at the district and class alignments for high school basketball. It's going to be right around the corner here, just getting started in a couple of weeks. And we've got another great season slated for you here on YHC. But first we'll take a look at the district and class alignments, and we're just going to speak these out. We don't have them in the graphics here, but we'll go with Class 1, District 1. Quite a bit of changes here in the couple of districts here in southeast Missouri in Class 1. Starting off with Class 1, District 1, Clarkton, Cooter, Couch, Delta C7, Koshkonong, Naylor, North Pemiscot, and Southland. Again, we'll run through those. Class 1, District 1, Clarkton, Cooter, Couch, Delta C7, Koshkonong, Naylor, North Pemiscot, and Southland. So we're used to seeing teams like Risco, Gideon, Scott County Central there in the mix in Class 1, even Delta. So quite a bit of changes here in the first two districts in Class 1 in high school basketball. Now moving to District 2, we've got Bell City, Delta, Gideon, Leopold, Oak Ridge, Richland, Risco, and Scott County Central. So a couple teams we typically see in Class 1, District 1 quite a bit lately. Certainly Risco and Scott County They've been battling out for that Class 1 District 1 title for years. Now they moved to District 2. And again, that Class 1 District 2, Bell City, Delta, Gideon, Leopold, Oak Ridge, Richland, Risco, and Scott County Central for Class 1 District 2. So interesting there for the District 1s, or Districts 1 and 2 in Class 1. So moving to Class 2, for high school basketball, Missouri, let's look at District 1 in Class 2. It is Bernie, Campbell, Hayti, Holcomb, Neelyville, Portageville, Zenith, Hornersville, and South Penobscot. So not a whole lot of change there. We've seen quite a few of these teams in Class 1, or excuse me, Class 2 District 1. So again, in Class 2 District 1, Bernie, Campbell, Hayti, Holcomb, Neelyville, Portageville, Zenith, Hornersville, and South Penobscot. Now looking at District 2 in Class 2, Class 2 District 2, Alton, East Carter, Ellington, Greenville, Thayer, Van Buren, and Winona. So those are the teams out west, and that's typically been the case in Class 2. So taking a look at Class 2 District 3, these are the teams that typically are just north on top of Class 1, or on top of District 1. So you usually have District 1 here in this Boot Hill area. District 2 is typically out west, and then District 3 is typically north, just north of District 1. So here's the District 3 teams in Class 2. Advance, Bloomfield, Chaffee, Meadow Heights, Oran, Puxico, St. Vincent, and Valley Catholic. Again, Class 2 District 3 is Advance, Bloomfield, Chaffee, Meadow Heights, Oran, Puxico, St. Vincent, and Valley Catholic. So not a lot of change there. We typically see those teams there in Class 2 District 3. Now let's move to Class 3. Let's go to Class 3 District 1. Certainly one of the biggest districts in the state, certainly in Class 3, most competitive for sure. Class 3 District 1 is Crothersville, New Madrid County Central, Charleston, Doniphan, East Prairie, Kennett, Malden, and Twin Rivers. So not really much change there at all, if any. I think it's pretty much the same teams we've always had there in Class 3 District 1. Crothersville, New Madrid County Central, Charleston, Doniphan, East Prairie, Kennett, Malden, and Twin Rivers. I think Doniphan might be the only team that they moved in there in that Class 3 District 1, as they've typically been out west in District 2. Speaking of District 2, Class 3 District 2, Arcadia Valley, Clearwater, Fredericktown, Kelly, Saxony Lutheran, Scott City, West County, and Woodland. Again, Class 3 District 2, Arcadia Valley, Clearwater, Fredericktown, Kelly, Saxony Lutheran, Scott City, West County, and Woodland for Class 3 District 2. Now let's look to Class 4 District 1. Won't see a whole lot of changes in these since there's not as many Class 4 schools in our area. But Class 4 District 1, Cape Central, Dexter, Notre Dame, Perryville, Sykeston, and St. Genevieve. I don't think there's any change from the last few years. Cape Central, Dexter, Notre Dame, Perryville, Sykeston, and St. Genevieve. I tell you, that's going to be one class to look forward to this year, as Sykeston's lost a lot of their talent. They're going to be coming back to the pack. Cape Central as well, and teams like Notre Dame and Dexter starting to really have their time now with competitive teams. So that'll be a team or a district to look out for this coming season. Class 5 District 1 shouldn't be much change there. Class 5 District 1 is only 4 teams. Typically, I think they've had 6, but I think they have had 4 in the past. Jackson, Northwest, Poplar Bluff, and Seckman. So not really any change there. Class 5 District 1, Jackson, Northwest of Cedar Hill, Poplar Bluff, and Seckman. So those are your Class 5 District 1 teams for this coming season. So really, there's only much change there in Class 1 and Class 2. There's so many small schools, and they try to divide that up with an even amount of teams. And we see teams move back and forth from Class 1 to Class 2. So that's why you might see some teams change there among the the bottom 2 classes. So that's where we really see a lot of movement between not only classes, but certainly the districts between Class 1 or District 1 and 2 here in the Boot Hill area. So a little bit of change there, especially in Class 1, Districts 1 and 2. That's where we see a lot of change year in and year out. And it does make a difference. Some of those district matchups and potential district tournament championship matchups for the end of the year. So we're still into football mode right now, but we will start to transition into basketball in a couple of weeks. looking to have a basketball preview coming up in a couple of weeks. I like to do that the week of Thanksgiving, early on in the week, as the season starts to get underway through Thanksgiving weekend into the first week of December. And usually on that basketball preview, we'll broadcast our schedule. We'll publish our broadcast schedule for the year. Also have coaches on and contributors to talk about the upcoming season coming off last year, and it makes a good time. So we'll try to do that in a couple of weeks. We didn't get to do it last week due to some personal obligations, but certainly try to get that done this year, probably in a couple weeks, the week of Thanksgiving, early on in the week. So just stay tuned for that. We'll try to pull that off in a couple of weeks. And now let's take a look at some college football and pro football games taking place this weekend. 5th-ranked Alabama coming off their loss against LSU, on the road against Mississippi State in the SEC. Indiana at 9th-ranked Penn State in the Big Ten. 17th-ranked Florida at Missouri. Michigan State at 15th-ranked Michigan. 23rd-ranked Navy at 16th-ranked Notre Dame. Wake Forest at Clemson in the ACC. 4th-ranked Georgia at 12th-ranked Auburn. Big SEC matchup there this weekend. And Georgia stay in that college football playoff. Certainly need a win against Auburn here today. 8th-ranked Minnesota at 20th-ranked Iowa. Big matchup there in the Big Ten. Minnesota coming off their victory against Penn State. Certainly need a key road Iowa victory to extend their undefeated season here this afternoon. Top-ranked LSU at Ole Miss in the SEC. 10th-ranked Oklahoma at 13th-ranked Baylor. Big 12 matchup taking place here on Saturday there in the Big 12 as well. And our local team, SEMO's at Eastern Illinois. You can watch that on ESPN Plus online if you got the subscription. SEMO 14-point favorites in that one on the road against Eastern Illinois. Eastern Illinois at the bottom of the conference. SEMO tied for the top there in the Ohio Valley Conference. And Coastal Carolina's at Arkansas State today, and you can watch that one on ESPN Plus too if you've got the ESPN Plus subscription. So Arkansas State hosting Coastal Carolina in the Sun Belt Conference here this afternoon. And take a look at the NFL matchups this weekend. The Cowboys at the Lions in the NFC. The Jaguars at the Colts, an AFC South matchup. The Bills at the Dolphins in the AFC East. The Broncos at the Vikings in Minnesota. The Saints at the Buccaneers in an NFC South matchup. The Jets at the Redskins. The Texans at the Ravens. Big-time matchup there. Two big-time quarterbacks. And right up there at the top of the MVP list and even AFC Pro Bowl list. Quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson for the Texans and Lamar Jackson for the Ravens. Should be a big-time matchup there in the AFC in Baltimore. The Cardinals at the 49ers in the NFC West. The Bengals at the Raiders in the AFC. I'd say the Raiders, one of the surprise teams this year, having a very good year. They're right on the heels of Kansas City for that AFC West lead so far this year. And the Patriots at the Eagles, a rematch of the Super Bowl a couple of years back, and that'll be on the road in Philadelphia for the Patriots. Should be a good matchup there, rematch of that Super Bowl from a few years back. And in Sunday Night Football, the Bears at the Rams in the NFC, and the Chiefs at the Chargers, an AFC West matchup on Monday Night Football on ESPN. So those are your matchups taking place this weekend in college and pro football. So that'll wrap up the roundtable today. Big matchups that we took a look at from last night in high school football. Also those class and district assignments for high school basketball. Very exciting there. As I said, we'll start to transition into basketball as we are now following Kennett and their state tournament run going forward. So we'll see when our football season ends. But basically when Kennett season ends, our season ends. So we'll see how far Kennett can go, and hopefully they can go as far as state championship. That'd be great. But we're going to follow them all the way out for their state tournament run, and then we'll start to make our transition to high school basketball. And like I said, we intend to have a basketball preview in a couple weeks, early on in the week, probably a Monday or Tuesday night before Thanksgiving that week. So look forward to that in a couple of weeks for a basketball preview for the sports round. Actually, we won't do that we'll probably replay it on the sports roundtable. We typically do that on a Monday or Tuesday night before Thanksgiving. So look forward to that one in a couple of weeks. And that's going to do it for us today. Appreciate our sponsors, our major sponsors for this year. Glen Sane Motors in Rector, Paragould, and Kennett. Appreciate Glen Sane Motors being along this year for another year of high school football and basketball, bringing the games to you right here on YHC, as well as Bales. That's Boot Hill Area Independent Living Services. We appreciate Bales and the services they provide for, certainly the needy and the handicapped, and also for an independent lifestyle for the handicapped to still live at home and taking care of their life independently. Bales, Boot Hill Area Independent Living Services, as well as Baldwin Automotive. Baldwin Automotive, that's Baldwin Ford Lincoln Toyota in Poplar Bluff, serving the area for over 40 years and home with a lifetime guarantee. Baldwin Automotive in Poplar Bluff. Appreciate all of our sponsors this year, helping bring you high school sports right here on cable television, YHC, and certainly online at yhctv.com. And also bringing our sports show each week, the Sports Roundtable, to keep you updated with everything going forward in our area. And that's all we got for you for today, and we'll look forward to seeing you back next week for another Roundtable. And until then, I'm Tyler Wagner. Have yourself a great week. Take care, everyone.